On a hill in the Eifel, there is a stone courtyard the size of a football pitch, ringed by dormitory blocks and anchored by a tower that still carries an eagle relief above its entrance. The men who built this place were not soldiers. They were the Nazi Party's hand-picked future rulers, drilled in ideology and obedience inside castles designed to look medieval. 10 of them. Number 1 is Ordensburg Krossinsee, a training fortress raised in a Pomeranian forest and abandoned to a country that had every reason to forget it. It started with an idea, hatched in 1933, that the right buildings could manufacture the right kind of man. The regime requisitioned medieval castles, seized churches, and built entirely new complexes from scratch, all to house an elite that never quite materialized. We begin with the most famous castle they borrowed. Number 10, the Wartburg, Eisenach, Germany. Drive south from Eisenach, and you will see it before you reach it. The Wartburg sits on a 410-meter bluff above the Thuringian forest, founded in 1067, home to St. Elizabeth, refuge of Martin Luther, and the place where the New Testament was first translated into German. It is, by any measure, one of the most important castles in Europe. Hitler called it the most German of all German castles. That was the problem. The regime did not build the Wartburg. It claimed it. The castle's 1,000-year history of poetry contests, religious refuge, and student protest was flattened into a single propaganda line about unbroken Germanic greatness. In 1938, the gold cross on the castle's tower was replaced with a swastika. The town of Eisenach objected. 3 days later, the cross went back up. It was one of the few times a community pushed back and won. The Wartburg survived the war with minor damage from American artillery in April 1945. Its armory collection was confiscated by Soviet forces and has never been seen since. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, visited by hundreds of thousands of people a year. The room where Luther translated the New Testament still has its original floor and panelled walls. The swastika lasted 3 days. The translation has lasted 5 centuries. Number 9, Falkenstein, Harz, Germany. Deep in the Harz Mountains, on a rock spur above the Selke Valley, Falkenstein Castle has stood since the 12th century. Its walls are Romanesque. Its chapel is Gothic. Its views run for miles across the forested ridgeline, and for most of its life it belonged to regional counts who used it as a hunting lodge and administrative seat. In the 1930s, the regime requisitioned Falkenstein for use as an ideological training site. The castle's remote hilltop position suited the purpose exactly. It was inaccessible, defensible, and carried the kind of medieval atmosphere the party wanted its cadets to absorb. Training courses and youth camps ran through the grounds until the war made them impractical. After 1945, the castle passed into East German hands and was eventually turned into a museum. It is open to visitors today, its medieval character largely restored. You can walk through the chapel, climb the keep, and look out across the same Selke Valley the party's administrators once surveyed. The falconry display in the courtyard is the main attraction now. The regime's tenure left almost no physical trace. Number 8. Burg Prunn, Rhine-Westphalia, Bavaria. Burg Prunn sits on a vertical limestone crag above the Altmühl Valley in Bavaria, and it looks exactly like the kind of castle a film location scout would invent. Sheer walls drop 70 meters to the river. The castle itself dates to the early 13th century and is best known for housing one of the oldest surviving manuscripts of the Nibelungenlied, the medieval German epic poem. The regime requisitioned Prunn in the 1930s. The Nibelungenlied connection was the draw. The poem's themes of loyalty, heroism, and a doomed warrior elite fitted the mythology the party was constructing, and Prunn became a site for ideological retreats and gatherings. The medieval halls were used for lectures and ceremonies that dressed party doctrine in the language of Germanic legend. Bavaria reclaimed the castle after the war. Today, it is a state museum, managed by the Bavarian Palace Administration, and the Nibelungenlied manuscript is its centerpiece. The cliff is still sheer. The medieval rooms are intact. The ideological retreats left no lasting mark on the fabric of the building, which is arguably the most honest summary of the regime's relationship with the places it borrowed. It wanted the weight of history without doing anything to earn it. Number 7. Blankenburg, Harz, Germany. Blankenburg Castle sits on the Blankenstein hill, 305 meters above the town, a Baroque palace with roots in the 12th century and 800 years of continuous aristocratic use. The House of Welf held it for centuries. Emperor Lothar III made it his residence. It is not, on the face of it, a castle with any obvious connection to the regime. But in the final months of the war, as the front lines collapsed, the regime moved administrative functions into the Harz. Blankenburg became a late-war seat of power, and the town around it became the site of a forced labour subcamp linked to the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp. 500 prisoners from the Blankenburg-Essig camp were made to work in the local factory. In September 1933, the Brunswick SS commander Friedrich Jeckeln had herded 140 communists and social democrats into a local inn and had them beaten. Some died. After the war, the ducal family left. The castle was used as a convalescent home, then a trade school, then left empty for 12 years. The vacancy nearly destroyed the building. A preservation society has been working to save it since 2005. You can visit, and what you will find is a Baroque palace, slowly coming back from decades of neglect, with almost nothing on the walls about what happened in the town below it. Number 6. Malbork Castle, Malbork, Poland. If you have seen a photograph of a medieval castle and could not place it, there is a reasonable chance it was Malbork. It is the largest castle in the world by surface area, the largest brick building in Europe, built by the Teutonic Knights from 1274 onward, and expanded for over a century until it covered 21 hectares and housed 3,000 men. It has been on the UNESCO Heritage Register since 1997, and it is the castle the regime wanted most. Malbork, then called Marienburg, was designated as the 4th Ordensburg. The plan was that cadets who had completed their first year at Krossinsee, their second at Vogelsang, and their third at Sonthofen would finish their training here, inside the walls of the original Teutonic fortress, with live-fire military exercises. The Nazis used the castle as a destination for annual pilgrimages of the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls, and in 1934 an amphitheatre was added to the east side for ceremonies. The 4th Ordensburg never opened. The war intervened. In 1945, more than half the castle was destroyed in fighting. The city became Polish, and the reconstruction that followed, still ongoing, is itself a remarkable achievement. 70% of the visible brickwork is post-war restoration using original techniques. The cathedral inside the complex, restored just before the war and then destroyed in battle, is still in ruins. The Teutonic Knights built Malbork in brick because stone was scarce on the Vistula Flats. The regime borrowed their name, their aesthetic, and their castle. The bricks outlasted them all. If you are finding these interesting, hit subscribe, because there are more of these for every corner of Europe. We will get to the most striking one shortly. Number 5. Quedlinburg, Saxony-Anhalt, Germany. On the 2nd of July 1936, Heinrich Himmler led a procession of SS officers through the streets of Quedlinburg, up the cobbled hill to the collegiate church of St. Servatius, and down into its 1,000-year-old crypt. They were there to commemorate the death of King Heinrich I, the man credited with founding the first German state in 919. Himmler believed he was the king's reincarnation. The church is one of the great early Romanesque buildings of Europe, completed by 1021, and the crypt holds the tombs of Heinrich and his wife Matilda. The SS seized it from its congregation and closed it in 1938. They hung a massive swastika in the chancel, altered the stonework to support it, and staged annual candlelit ceremonies in the crypt, decorated with SS banners. Himmler gave a speech in the nave in 1936, declaring Christianity a harmful foreign influence on Germany. The SS even dug beneath the crypt, searching for Heinrich's skeleton, convinced the bones would lend their project 1,000 years of legitimacy. Today the church is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The swastika is gone. The structural alterations to the chancel were so badly done that they actually damaged the building and had to be reversed. You can still visit the crypt where Himmler staged his ceremonies. The frescoes on the ceiling date to the 13th century. The SS left none of their own. Number 4. Ordensburg Sonthofen, Allgäu, Bavaria. Drive into the Bavarian Alps, south of Kempten, and you will reach Sonthofen, a small town in the Oberallgäu backed by mountains on 3 sides. On the hillside above it sits a vast complex of stone buildings arranged around courtyards, designed by the architect Hermann Giesler and completed in 1934. It is one of 3 purpose-built Ordensburgen, the so-called order castles of the Nazi Party, constructed to train the next generation of political leaders. Cadets aged 25 to 30, all party members, physically healthy and certified racially pure, spent their 3rd year here studying military tactics and physical conditioning. The actor Hardy Kruger attended as a teenager. Adolf Hitler visited in November 1937. By the war's end, the complex was being used as a military hospital. Here is the detail that separates Sonthofen from the rest of this countdown. It is still a barracks. After the war, French troops took it. Then the American army used it as the central training facility for the US constabulary. In 1956, the Bundeswehr, West Germany's new armed forces, took over and renamed it Generaloberst Beck Kaserne, after Ludwig Beck, a member of the resistance who was executed for his role in the July 1944 plot to assassinate Hitler. The building is landmarked. The renaming was deliberate. A castle built to train the regime's elite now carries the name of a man who tried to kill its leader. Number 3. Wewelsburg, Prunn, North Rhine-Westphalia. You will recognize Wewelsburg from the air before you recognize it from the ground. It is the only triangular castle in Europe, 3 round towers connected by massive walls, built between 1603 and 1609 as a secondary residence for the Prince Bishops of Paderborn. In 1934, Heinrich Himmler signed a 100-year lease on the property. He wanted it as the spiritual center of the SS. What followed was 12 years of reconstruction, ritual, and forced labor. Concentration camp prisoners from Sachsenhausen and the purpose-built Niederhagen camp were used to rebuild the castle. At least 1,285 prisoners died in the process. Himmler's architects lowered the floor of the North Tower's cellar to create a crypt modelled on Mycenaean domed tombs, with 12 pedestals spaced around its walls for funerary urns. Above it, the Obergruppenführersaal, the hall of the supreme SS leaders, held 12 columns and a 12-spoked sun wheel set into the marble floor. The number 12 was everywhere. Himmler envisioned 12 SS generals seated around his table like a dark parody of the Knights of the Round Table. Neither room was ever used for its intended purpose. The plans grew more grandiose, including a semicircular complex radiating 600 meters from the North Tower, which would have required the demolition of the entire surrounding village. Construction stopped after Stalingrad. In March 1945, as the American 3rd Armored Division approached, an SS demolition squad tried to destroy the castle on Himmler's orders. They managed to set fires and damage the southeastern tower. The North Tower's stone walls survived. Today, Wewelsburg is a museum and memorial, housing the only SS-specific permanent exhibition in the world. A youth hostel occupies part of the complex. Photography is forbidden in the North Tower's 2 rooms because the museum does not want visitors posing in front of the symbols Himmler put there. The black sun motif in the floor of the hall has been adopted by far-right and neo-pagan groups worldwide, which is exactly why the museum keeps the room open and explained rather than sealed. But the detail that stays is this. The budget Himmler secured for the project was 250 million Reichsmarks, and the men who dug the crypt out of solid rock were concentration camp prisoners who did not survive the work. Number 2. Ordensburg Vogelsang, Eifel, North Rhine-Westphalia. On a ridge above the Urft Reservoir in the Eifel Hills, Ordensburg Vogelsang spreads across 50,000 square meters of listed buildings. It is one of the largest surviving examples of Nazi architecture anywhere in Europe. The total area is roughly the size of a small town, and until 2006 you could not set foot in it. Vogelsang was the second of the 3 Ordensburgen, designed by the same architect as Krossinsee, Clemens Klotz, and built using up to 1,500 workers over 2 years. It opened in April 1936 in a ceremony attended by Hitler. The complex included a vast gymnasium, reportedly the largest in the world at the time, along with dormitories, lecture halls, a swimming pool, and an elaborate system of outdoor training courses on the surrounding hillsides. Cadets in their 20s, preferably married, spent their second year here studying what the regime called sociology, racial ideology, and the development of willpower. Reports from the time mentioned teacher shortages, improvised course content, and criticism that the program placed too much emphasis on physical conditioning and not enough on anything resembling an education. The courses ran for just 3 years. The war ended them. From 1950 to 2005, Vogelsang was a military training area used first by the British and then by the Belgian armed forces. No civilians entered for over half a century. When the Belgians left and the site opened to visitors in January 2006, it was the first time most Germans had ever been able to walk through a building their own country had built 70 years earlier. Today, it sits inside the Eifel National Park. There is a permanent exhibition, a documentation centre and guided tours. The eagle relief above the entrance to the main tower is still there. The swimming pool is empty. The dormitories are stripped to bare concrete. What Vogelsang demonstrates more clearly than any other site on this list is the gap between ambition and reality. The regime built a complex for an elite that trained for 3 years and then went to war. The buildings have stood empty for longer than they were ever used. Number 1. Ordensburg Krossinsee, Pomerania, Poland. This is the one. The first of the 3 Ordensburgen, the castle where it all began, raised in a Pomeranian forest on the shore of Lake Krosin and dedicated on the 24th of April 1936. The groundbreaking had been 2 years earlier, on the 22nd of April 1934. Clemens Klotz designed it. Robert Ley, the head of the German Labour Front, oversaw its construction. 20 million Reichsmarks went into a vast complex of rustic stone buildings with granite foundations, colonnaded courts, dormitory blocks, a great hall, and training grounds spread through the forest. The site was the first year of a 4-year pipeline. Cadets arrived here at 25, certified racially pure and physically perfect, and spent 12 months studying what the regime called character development, which in practice meant racial philosophy and ideological obedience. The Duke of Windsor visited on the 13th of October 1937, photographed alongside Robert Ley in a white coat, touring the facilities of a regime that had been in power for less than 5 years. In 1937, the Hitler Youth began sharing the compound with the older cadets. The boys were aged 12 to 18. By 1939, as the adult Junkers went to war, the teenagers became the sole occupants of a facility designed for men twice their age. On the 29th of June 1944, a fire destroyed part of the complex. By early 1945, with Soviet forces advancing through Pomerania, the castle was abandoned. What happened next is the part that makes Krossinsee different from everything else in this countdown. The territory became Polish. The town of Falkenburg became Zlocieniec. And the colossal stone training castle, raised to forge the leaders of a 1,000-year Reich, became the property of a country the Reich had invaded, occupied, and devastated. Poland's 2nd Battalion, 12th Tank Brigade, uses it to this day. 2 large brick towers from the original construction still stand. In 2016, archaeologists dug into the foundations and found a sealed container buried at the groundbreaking in 1934, containing coins, newspapers, photographs of Hitler, and 2 copies of Mein Kampf. The capsule's makers would never have predicted that their castle would end up in Polish hands, or that the National Museum in Szczecin would be the institution cataloguing their relics. The buildings are too large to demolish and too compromised to celebrate. They stand among the trees on the shore of a lake in northwestern Poland, used by the army of a country that did not exist in the borders the castle's builders recognized, carrying a function none of them would have imagined. The cadets are gone, the ideology is gone, the granite foundations are still there. Every castle on this list was a classroom. The regime commissioned architects, poured concrete, and engraved eagles above the doors. 10 castles across Europe, purpose-built or requisitioned, designed to manufacture an elite that would rule a continent. The elite trained for 3 years. The buildings have stood for 90. Subscribe and we will find the next 10. Thank you.